Thanks for tuning into Howe's Things, a podcast and radio show from the David A. Howe Public Library, recorded right here in Wellsville, New York. It's Banned Books Week, so I have a special guest with me today. My special guest has been on the podcast in its earlier versions, back on the All the Book Show. He's here with us every week, musically. Today, he's 30 and flirty. It's Ben Laymen. Ben, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's been a while. I'm glad to be back.
I'm glad to have you back. And right away, we just got to acknowledge this is your 30th birthday. It's happening right now.
That is correct. I am officially
Wow.
30 as of September the 20th,
Wow.
which is
Wow,
today,
wow,
date of
wow.
recording.
This is a really narrow window where you and I are both in our 30s at the same time.
That is true. Yeah, I'm not really sure how I got here, how I made it this
Yeah.
far, but
Yeah.
well, we
You
will
did
see
it.
what the future holds.
You did it. Wow. Well, thanks for spending your birthday with me talking about a very frustrating topic, and that is banned books.
Yes, sir. I'm all about it. I mean, all not about it.
Right, of course. Yeah, which is good. Yeah, because I wanted to get that out of the way because I wanted to have you on to talk about this, but I should have checked before we started. Your stance on banning books, pro or con? What do you is book banning thumbs up, thumbs down? What do you think?
I'm gonna go with a firm thumbs down on
So
that
you're
one.
not in favor of banning books?
No,
Oh, okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Banning books is officially the official Ben Laymen stance is not good.
Coming out strong against banning books. That's good because this would have been a really awkward episode had you said anything else.
Yeah, no.
So, well, I've got the list of the most challenged books for this year. I've read a couple, and I know that you've read a couple. So we'll get into that in a minute. But before we start talking about downer things, let's open up our books and see where our bookmarks are at. Ben, that was you.
Yeah,
That was
it
you
was
playing
me.
that song in what, 2014? So long ago.
A whole chorus of me's.
What have you been reading? What have you been getting into lately? Anything good?
I've been hitting a couple book walls.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I bounced off a couple of books recently. I bounced off The Chocolate War by Robert Cormier, and I thought I would
Okay.
give Blonde a try, Joyce Carol Oates.
Oh.
And I was like, this is, I don't know. So I mean, the writing is super engaging, but it's also very, I mean, it sort of slowly unravels, and I just have to
Yeah.
be in a certain mindset. I think I eventually want to get back to it, but it'll probably take me a very long time.
That's kind of what happened to me. I probably read half of Blonde and then was like, this is making me a sad person. I have to stop. And I went back to it, several months later, just kind of picked it up where I left off and finished it. And I do really appreciate that book. I think it's an expertly written book, but it is, it's heavy and it's unsettling and it's upsetting all around.
Yeah. So trying to balance that with some other stuff. The most recent book I finished was a book called The Dead Fathers Club.
A lot of fun, light stuff you're picking up.
Yeah,
there.
well, so it's by Matt Haig, who I believe is the same author as The Midnight Library. I
I was like, why do I know that name? You're right. It is Midnight Library.
So it's a young adult novel, and I didn't realize until after I started it that it's a retelling of Hamlet. But it's pretty original, I would say. I mean, it didn't even dawn on me until I actually read because really I was immediately pulled in by the title and the book jacket. I was expecting a tone a little bit more like something like the Graveyard Book, but honestly, it's not like that at all. It's pretty dark, and I don't know if I would the main character is 11, but I definitely don't think I would recommend it for that age.
Not an 11-year-old.
But I found it really, really well written. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it went a lot deeper than I would have expected it to.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Have you read The Midnight Library?
I have not.
No, I haven't either.
But definitely interested now based on his. And then I just finished the graphic novel Nimona.
Oh, yeah.
By Noel Stevenson.
Yeah.
I really liked that one also.
That's cool. I haven't gotten into that one, but I see it all the time. I mean, it's on a million lists, and I feel like it's always on like YA graphic novel displays and things. It's got a lot of street cred
it's an
going for it.
interesting thing. I didn't. Again, this is another thing I didn't know. I think it started as a webcomic.
That makes sense.
The world building is very minimal, but it just kind of throws you into this part fantasy, part technologically advanced hospitals, and so it's like a world of magic and dragons, but also guns and
Okay.
so it's like medieval steampunk almost.
Oh, There's so many different elements you're throwing at me. Okay, all right.
But I would say the actual world building is somewhat surface level. It's just like, here's what it is, deal with it.
Okay.
But yeah, I found it pretty charming. It's a little tropey, but
Yeah.
like I enjoyed it.
Hmm. Well, everything you're saying makes perfect sense to me if it was a webtoon first, because I think, we did an episode about this a while back. And one of the things I learned in that deep dive was just how different that kind of short form storytelling is.
Mm.
When you read something like I just recently read through Heartstopper on the webtoon app versus the paperback, just a totally different experience. And I think there are certain things like world building and some of the development that you just have to be like, look, they've got whatever, 3 panels or however much
Mm.
space to get this story out, and so you're gonna have to do some of the work yourself, and I think that's kind of an interesting trend in things like comics and graphic novels as of late.
At the same time, though, like I would have almost preferred, just because of the way the plot progressed, like I would almost preferred like a little bit more of like at the very end of the book they threw like after the plot was over they threw in these like special holiday
Oh,
web comics that they
yeah.
published, and they were, I mean, they were so cute, they were so charming, and I was like,
Mm.
I feel like I would prefer like a little more of that, versus, we
Oh,
have to set up this conflict and then,
right.
it
Okay.
it felt, I'm not gonna say by the numbers because I did really enjoy it, but yeah, I would have preferred a little bit more of that, a little, felt like it would have
Some of the
added
just
a little
light
more
character
flavor.
kinda
Yeah,
stuff. Hmm,
but at
interesting.
the same time though, I would recommend it. I really enjoyed the, I mean, the art is beautiful.
Yeah. It always looks cool.
Yeah. One of the things though, it's like the book binding's like tight, so I'm always like, there's always this beautiful art that's getting sucked towards the middle of the page. That
Yeah.
always bugs me.
Yeah.
But again, not the author's fault.
Yeah.
Enjoy the book.
True. Well, I think we find that all the time. I see the books that are on repair and stuff, and I think books like that do people tend to like really try to yank those open. So I don't know why they don't make the end papers wider because that's a common
Mhm.
complaint. So you're not alone there. You mentioned the Graveyard Book, and that's fun for two reasons. Number one, the first time you were ever on the David A. Howe Library podcast was a Neil Gaiman
Mhm.
spotlight, and people can still listen to that on the library's YouTube page. It's one of the most popular episodes from the All the Books era of the podcast, so that's fun. But also, we've been doing this Discord book club where the library has a Discord server, and we have done a monthly book club, usually graphic novel focused. The one we did most recently was She-Hulk, talking about the comics and the show. For Halloween in October, we're going to be doing the Graveyard Book, and there is the novel version, and then there's a two-part graphic novel adaptation. So I'm planning to read the graphic novel version of it. Have you read the graphic novel or
Just,
just the
yeah,
standard prose?
just the book.
Okay, two
Yeah.
thumbs up. You're a fan of the Graveyard
Yeah,
Book?
I really enjoyed it. It's probably close to my favorite Gaiman that I've read.
Nice. Have you done any of the? I know like the Sandman show seems to be in the news constantly. Are you up on that or no?
I did watch the first episode of The Sandman, and I think I will continue, but,
Didn't knock your socks off.
I think a lot of times with Neil Gaiman, he'll introduce a lot of these fantastical elements, and then it'll just be like, "Here, this is what it is," but there's no it doesn't necessarily congeal together in a, uniform way for me where it's like this, it's all
Okay.
part of the world. The Graveyard Book did that for me, but something like Neverwhere didn't quite, like, I do like that book, but it didn't quite.
No, didn't reach the same heights. Maybe you were more open to the loosey goosey type of storytelling in your 20s, but now that you're 30s,
It's all over, baby.
yeah, just more rigid, and you need your meat and potatoes kind of story. Maybe that's
It's
all it is. Just
it's
aging.
yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
formed this opinion as of midnight this morning, so
Did you?
yeah.
Wow, you've been busy. You've been busy. Big start.
Have
Big
you watched
start.
any of the Sandman show?
No, I haven't read a ton of Neil Gaiman, and I have never read the original Sandman. I didn't watch the show. Eric, speaking of the old days on the All the
Mhm.
Book Show, was always like, "You should never read the Sandman. It's too dark for you. It will destroy your soul." And so I took his word, and I never have. So no, I
The
haven't.
show had some pretty dark moments, so, and that
Yeah.
was only the first episode, so yeah,
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm too soft. I'm too much of a chicken maybe for it. I have been reading some fun stuff though. I just finished a YA called Azar on Fire. It's by Olivia Tahi, And this was one that I saw the cover and was like, yeah, that looks like a fun book. And it is about this girl who has damaged vocal cords, but she wants to be in a rock band. She's written all these songs, but she can't sing. And so she gets sort of coerced into participating in her school's battle of the band and ends up becoming the drummer and finding a singer who can sing the songs and stuff. And so it's all about her processing her feelings about that and kind of adapting to being more of a writer than a singer. And I don't know, it was fun. I had a good time with it. I listened to it on audiobook, and a big part of the plot is that the main character Azar has the damaged vocal cords, and so the reader, when she was reading dialogue, would kind of make a soft, raspy voice, and it would like give me a sore throat, like just listening to it. So I kind of wish I would have read it, but that was fun. We just did our last episode was on Batman Day, and so I was reading some Batman. I read one called Batman Year Two, which is by Mike W. Barr. Not a great Batman story. It's sort of about what if Batman kind of just gave up and decided he was going to like use guns and like work with criminals, kind of like the ends justify the means sort of a mindset. Just really doesn't work with the character, and like it ends and you're kind of like, well, this has no impact on the character going forward, so why did I waste my time? You're not a big you don't read that kind of comics. You don't read like Batman and stuff, do you?
No, no. I read Year
Oh
One once
yeah.
upon a time, and I liked it okay, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Year One is an interesting story, and I think this was kind of billed as like the sequel to Year One, but it's not in any way.
Mhm,
I think what Year One had going for it was the Commissioner Gordon narration and stuff just kind of puts you in a different headspace. And so if Year Two was meant to follow in that mold, it is very forgettable.
yeah.
That was a bit of a letdown. I'm currently reading Happy Go Lucky by David Sedaris. I'm always thrilled when a new David Sedaris book comes out. Have you read him?
Yeah, I've read, several. I've read Naked and,
Mhm.
Me Talk Pretty One Day, but
Okay. I don't know that I've ever been disappointed in one of his books. And I this one seemed to come out pretty quickly. He did the 2 volumes of his diaries, which I thought were pretty good, pretty fun to listen to. And then this one here, Happy Go Lucky. So I just started it. I'm not very far in. That's one where I do recommend the audiobook
mhm.
because his reading of it is so fun. So yeah, that's my current read of the moment. Are you watching anything good? Like what's your current binge?
I don't know about binge. I've been slowly making my way through Better Call Saul.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. I
I'm
haven't watched Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul.
yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna tell you that you're missing out, different strokes. It's very as everybody says, like, it's a slow burn, but at least with Better Call Saul, like, the character work is so good. I mean,
Hmm.
they managed to make the most banal things, like, feel energized, and yeah, I'm
Huh.
all about it. I'm all in.
I don't know that I've ever heard a bad thing about those shows, so I'm not surprised to hear you say that.
And then on the lesser side for me at least, have been watching Rings of Power with my brother as it comes out.
Oh, okay. Okay. We don't have Prime at the moment, so we're kinda waiting.
It has some moments, it's pretty to look at. I'm such a fan of the Peter Jackson films,
Mm,
and so I can see a little bit more of the connective tissue with that than even The Hobbit, so that's a plus for me, but I think
okay.
narratively, it's a little bit all over the place.
Not working.
I'm
Hmm.
not enjoying most of the characters, but it's nice to look
Okay.
at.
Yeah. I mean, I do wanna get to it someday. We just haven't yet. We just finished one called Moonhaven, which is on AMC, and that was pretty good. It was about, a colony on the moon whose purpose was to kind of figure out a path forward to revitalize and save the Earth, which is, like, on the edge of destruction. So kind of I mean, the whole like the earth is dying, what are we going to do is not a new premise, but I think the approach they took to it was, and it starts with a murder mystery, which is cool, and it's a cool thread to go through. It's just 6 episodes, so it moved quickly, and I'm definitely like, all right, give us season 2 now. And then over on Apple, my wife and I are watching one called Surface, which is about this woman who wakes up after a boating accident and has no memories, and there's all this stuff going on in her life, and she doesn't know who to trust, and she starts making decisions, and you're like, what are you doing? So that's been fun, but that definitely is a slow burn. I feel like you have to watch at least 2 episodes just to like have a plot development.
This is giving me, like, Woman in the Water vibes.
A little bit. We've also been watching the show that I guess speaking of Neil Gaiman adaptations. We've been watching the show Staged, which is David Tennant and Michael Sheen, and it's one they did over Zoom during the pandemic, and it's about how they were going to do a play, and then the pandemic kind of canceled the play, but they're going to keep rehearsing the play via Zoom, and they all just kind of did it from their house, like in 2020. And so that's really fun so far. I just love both of those actors, so it's fun to just kind of see them riff together.
Did they do American Gods together?
It was Good Omens. That's Neil Gaiman, right?
Good Omens. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think Good Omens is yeah, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett
Oh, you're right.
together.
Yep. All right. Well, let's roll into some book news.
Looking to the future to see what it proves. It's time for book news.
So as we record here, we're in the midst of Hispanic Heritage Month. So I thought that I would pull this article from the Los Angeles Times called 11 Books to Read During Hispanic Heritage Month. So these are some new books coming out. The article is by Alex Espinoza, and we'll put this on the library Twitter. So you can follow that in all the book show for the podcast, D.A. Howe Library for the library. Here's a list. The Last Karankawas by Kimberly Garza. The time is 2008. Hurricane Ike is about to battle the Gulf Coast, unraveling the lives of a group of Mexican and Filipino residents in Galveston, Texas. Garza manages to expertly capture a range of voices in this stunning and elegant polyphonic novel published in August. Expect great things from this debut writer, says our author here, Alex Espinoza. Number 2 on the list, High Risk Homosexual by Edgar Gomez. This book examines Latinx queer identity in all its layers while incisively critiquing the notion of machismo as a cultural marker. Number 3, Locust by Exta Maya Murray. Murray's tale of two female gang members in East LA holding their own amid the violence and mayhem around them is searing and unapologetic, giving us a far more complicated depiction of Latino inner city life than what is typically offered. Sounds interesting. Book 4 on the list here, This Thing Between Us by Gus Marino. Alexa and Siri are no match for Itza, the sinister voice-controlled smart assistant in Marino's heart-pounding horror novel, named a Best Book of the Year by NPR and the New York Public Library. That sounds kind of fun. I'm always down for an evil AI taking over, you know?
I'd be interested to see like a different spin on it. I feel
Yeah,
like I have seen so many of those
I know.
stories.
It's true.
So if it's gotten such accolades, you know,
Yeah.
it's must be worth checking out.
Are you an X-Files fan?
No, I'm interested in it. It's always been on my like maybe like I want to watch at some point
Yeah,
in the future,
it's
but I've just
massive.
not gotten around
There's
to
so
it.
much of it.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
huge undertaking. My wife, the ultimate X-Files fan, and the most recent season they did, there was a really fun episode about basically that AI taking over. It was sort of like it felt like it's just a little standalone, almost Twilight Zone-y kind of episode where Mulder and Scully are sort of victim to smart houses and things, which I thought was, even though, as you're pointing out here, that is a pretty common trope. I thought they made it work pretty well. That was pretty neat. I lost track of what number I'm on. So the next book on the list, Their Dogs Came With Them by Helena Maria Viramontes. The shadowy quarantine authority is but one of the many threats the four women at the heart of this novel must face. There's also violence, displacement, and the bulldozers tasked with flattening whole neighborhoods to make way for the construction of freeways. Finally on the list here, City of God by Gil Quadros. Quadros was only 34 when he died of AIDS in 1996. This book, a fusion of fiction and poetry, documents the lives of young men exploring their burgeoning sexuality as the AIDS crisis ripped through the queer Chicano community. A lot of these books we have in the collection. Any we don't, we can get for you. It's a mix of new things and old things, so it's a pretty comprehensive list. So again, we'll have that on the library Twitter. Ben, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is banned books.
Oh boy, here we go.
Always a good time. So every year, ALA pulls together a list of the books that were most challenged throughout the U.S. And these can be all over the place. This is schools, libraries, bookstores, whatever. Book banning as it once was is not really something that's like common practice. So even though we throw around the term banned books, challenged books is a better description of what we're talking about here. ALA.org/advocacy/bbooks has a bunch of stuff, a bunch of information about the challenge books. It has lists from year to year. A lot of books show up perpetually. They'll like The Handmaid's Tale seems like it's there, pops off for a couple of years, pops back on, whatever. So it's typically a mix of new and old things, and it's always frustrating, always weird. Do you have any experience with have you ever been in a place where books were challenged, or you saw a big uprising to a book?
The closest example I could think of is Harry Potter.
Yes.
'Cause I for a brief time when I was younger, I went to an international school, and my 3rd grade teacher read the whole class the first 2 Harry Potter books. Once the parents found out, I mean, what like, yeah, everyone
Wow.
was freaking out, and so that was immediately, and then right after that, like, yeah, I personally was
Yeah.
banned from reading,
Mm.
but, uh
Right, but that was one that did cause a lot of stir, and there, I feel like
uh,
that's debated even today, and not just because J.K. Rowling's a nightmare of a person, but because, that question I think remains of people who, challenge it for religious reasons or whatever, that it's like promoting witchcraft or something like that.
mhm,
It's like in the same breath, it is the book, despite its flaws and despite, problematic things that have come out author-wise later on, it is a book that got, a generation of kids to pick up a book and when they might not have
mhm,
otherwise. So you can't deny its influence in that way. I think you could debate what other
and
influence it has. But yes,
specifically referenced in the, memoir we're talking about today
yeah, yep,
as yeah, as the catalyst for learning how to read.
yeah, exactly. I remember there was a time I worked in an academic library, and there was a time when books kept like disappearing, and they tended to be like romance or things like that were I don't know, racy, I guess, by someone's standards. And I found out that somebody was hiding them. Like they weren't like throwing them away or stealing them or whatever, but they were hiding them so that people couldn't find them. And that's such a subtle way to like censor, because that's the real issue. I mean, that's what we're talking about, censorship in general. And
Yeah.
I think people discount what a slippery slope that can be.
It's so frustrating. Like, I was just reading about this I mean, I was going through some of the, like, the Goodreads for the book that we're talking about, and, like,
Hmm.
there's a group in I wanna say Florida, but that's probably just my internal like, I can't remember. There's a like, a group that, like, it's not just, like they're not calling for actually banning the books, they just have these banned list of, challenge books, and they circulate them with their group, and then they just keep them perpetually checked out. So it's like it's so insidious.
Oh, jeez.
And
Yeah.
it makes me so mad.
What clever. What clever villainous. All right, I'm gonna give you number 10 on the list, Beyond Magenta by Susan Culkin. Banned and challenged for LGBTQIA plus content, and because it was considered to be sexually explicit. So yeah, this is a memoir, and it's at this point about 10 years old, and it's like a collection of just people's individual stories, and it's sort of presented without filter or without commentary. Really, it's just kind of like this is an experience somebody had. So I see this one pop up a lot because people are claiming that by telling those stories that you're somehow like glorifying those things or you're like rubber stamping all the things that happened. I don't understand banning or challenging memoirs, because it's like these are just experiences that people have had, and so like I don't know, like I feel like there's the same conversation that we have just about every year whenever we do a banned books episode, but like when it comes to kids and kids reading and kids being curious, I don't feel as a parent that a book is more powerful than I am to talk to my son about things. You know what I mean? I just would never, my thought would never be like, oh no, he's going to read that book and then it's going to change his worldview forever. And he will never talk about it again. And will never, you know what I mean? I just think that's a weird responsibility to put outside of like yourself as a parent or just as a person. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, it's how dare we legitimize one person's experience or,
Right. Yeah.
and, I'm not a parent, but at the same time, like, at the very least, any one of these books, is always, like, conversation fodder, why wouldn't you want to discuss it's complicated issues with your
Yeah.
kid?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's always I don't know. I'll read a few more. Book number 9. This book is Gay by Juno Dawson. Reasons banned and challenged, relocated. Sometimes it's just relocated and restricted for providing sexual education and LGBTQIA plus content. We've been doing these Pride Month book club episodes, and 2 years ago we did one called Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I was reading it with my friend Bo, and I read it and kind of thought that the sex scenes in it, it was two men. I kind
mhm.
of thought, oh wow, those were more graphic than I was expected, and he was like, those were so tame, and it's like that's just the thing. It's like I'm so conditioned to like read stories about, sex scenes that between a man and a woman or whatever, that like those I don't even think about it, but reading
Mhm,
something different than that stands out to you. And I feel like that's what this whole list is about. It's like this is different. This stands out to me, and so therefore it's like terrible and explicit.
mhm. Yeah, there's
Anyway.
such a big leap to, like, this challenges my perception to, like, this thing should not exist.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think too, when you talk about, oh, this book is indoctrinating or whatever, it's like, so there's that book and there's like the 900 books around it that are professing what somebody challenging this might say is like the
Mhm,
norm. It's like, so you think this one book is going to like outweigh like the 900 other books that are being like read that have similar content, but I don't know. I get exhausted with it. Like I just have no patience for it. It's just so stupid.
I mean, have you had library patrons come to you specifically to, like, complain about any of these books or a specific book that's not on one of these lists or content?
I mean, the horror stories that I hear, from other communities, and not a lot local. I honestly don't hear a lot of this local, but just reading things like journals and other like publications. I Some of the things that libraries and librarians face with this are so severe. I mean, there was that library in Michigan who had their budget shot down because they wouldn't remove things, stuff like that. So intense. So the answer to your question is yes. I mean, I've had specific books challenged a handful of times since I've been here, and every time we've just had a response to it that's just kind of like, "Thanks for letting us know that this book offends you." We try to represent many different thought processes and experiences and worldviews, and if this book is not speaking to you, let me help you find one that does. You know what I mean? It's just like it's not one or the other, and we could never do that. So
Mhm,
nothing has ever come beyond like, I don't think you should have this book here, and then a conversation, and then that's it, and the book stays. So I think locally, here in Wellsville, I think we've been really fortunate and had a pretty open-minded community as far as that. So no, it hasn't been something that I would say is a problem here, but you never know. And like sometimes I hear things or see things like online that aren't necessarily directed at the library, but then I think like, oh, okay, well, we have that book in the collection, so if that's being challenged elsewhere, it's only a matter of time. But again, I think people are pretty understanding about what a library is, and I think that is the norm. I think the majority of people would say that. It's the vocal extreme minority that says other things. Book number 8, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Reasons banned and challenged because it depicts child sexual abuse and was considered sexually explicit. I haven't read that one. I've read Beloved, which is also I mean, it's a rough read and is been on the
mhm.
challenge list many a times. Have you read much Toni Morrison?
I have not, admittedly, at one point, I was supposed to have read Beloved for a class of mine, and
You
I
didn't do it.
read the first, like, chapter, but there's too much going on at the
Yeah, yeah.
time. Yeah.
It's rough. I mean, Beloved really is a rough read. I've read Song of Solomon as well. That one's more of an odd read. I would say God Help the Child is probably my favorite. It's a multi-generational story that she did, and it's not without its challenging topics, but I just feel like that's good, like reading things that are different from
Mhm.
my experience, even rough or upsetting things. I guess I just feel like that's sort of how you gain empathy and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, just to that specific, like, the book I'm sure it's shown up on one of these lists at some point, but the book Speak by Laurie
Sure.
Halse
Yeah,
Anderson,
yeah.
has long been one of my favorites just for, like, I mean, it's just the way that it talks about that issue and not only brings it to light, but yeah, just I don't know. I felt like I gained such a deeper understanding even though it was uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and I mean, I even without that experience in me, like, I felt like I could relate to that character so much. And, high school kids need to be able to talk about these
Yeah.
things because these things do happen.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not on the list here, but it is often. That's one of the ones I was thinking of when I was saying like it'll be on the list for a couple years, go off for a couple years, be on again. So yeah, it's not here. This next one is kind of interesting. Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl by Jesse Andrews. banned and challenged because it was considered sexually explicit and degrading to women. This brings up kind of a funny little, I mean, not funny, but a more complex thing for me because we actually did this book for a YA for Adults book club. And it is kind of degrading to women. Like it is kind of a, I don't know. Like I don't think this is a, I didn't enjoy it as a reader, and I also kind of thought like, geez, I don't know if those are things that you want to be like impressing in young people's mind. But and it's the same conversation that, the teen librarian and I here, we were just kind of talking about things like Twilight and stuff like that, because Twilight, I it's super popular. You're familiar with Twilight. I mean, I don't know if you've read it or seen them or whatever, but
To a degree,
okay.
yeah,
The
yeah.
core relationship in Twilight, in my reading of it, and through the book and the movies, is a pretty abusive and unhealthy relationship, but it's presented in a way that kind of glorifies the suffering in the relationship. And I feel like that is really damaging for young people to read something like that and think, wow, this is so romantic, this is how romance and love is supposed to be, I should feel terrible. you know
Mhm.
it puts you in a weird place when you're the person who's purchasing books, for public consumption, because on the one hand, massively popular book. If we didn't
Mhm.
have it, we'd be getting asked about it all the time. We'd be having to place holds at other libraries or get it in from other places. But personally, like I don't think it's a very rewarding book for somebody to read. So, that brings up some complexity there. What do you think about that?
I mean, it all goes back to, like, at the very baseline, it's gonna be, an opening to a
Yeah.
conversation. Like, you can't prevent people from reading what they're interested in,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I mean, you're right, it's a very complex topic. I had some of the same feelings about 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, that's like when I read it, I was, post high school, but like I was invested in the mystery of it, but at the same time acknowledging I was like, this is like pretty not great.
I haven't read that one, but about a suicide, right?
Yeah, yeah, it can be taken to seen as glorifying suicide
Yeah.
to a
I
degree,
guess I'd always kinda
depending on
heard.
who's reading it.
Right, I'd always kinda heard
Yeah.
that it sort of romanticized that concept, you
Yeah,
know?
because it's like, "Oh, here are the reasons that I killed myself. Here's why you should feel bad," and then it's sort of like the vindication. Again, it's a book I understand
Yeah,
why it would get challenged, but I wouldn't try to take that
right,
from somebody.
exactly. Well, I mean, it all comes back to that concept of censorship, like, and it being a slippery slope. When do you stop? Like, if I insert my judgment for what a person should or shouldn't read or have access to, even with good intentions, what is the next step?
Mhm,
Like, where do you go from there? How do you find that line and everything? So it's just, you just can't do it. I mean, to a certain extent, you have to trust people to make decisions for themselves. And, I think as a library, we can make sure that we have the full, a full assortment of, as I said, viewpoints and things expressed, so that we're showing and purchasing things that promote healthy lifestyles and things. But that, I don't think that means that we have the right or even the responsibility to be a wall, to be like, no, I don't think that's good for you, so you can't have it. The next book on the list is one that I often associate with you. I feel like it's one of your favorite books, so you tell me if I'm wrong. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie.
I wouldn't say favorite. I did enjoy it. For a long time, Sherman Alexie was up there with some of my
Yeah,
favorite
I guess
authors.
yeah.
He's fallen in favor a little bit. But at the same time, yeah, Reservation Blues was the big one from him that I
Okay.
really, really did
Yeah, I
enjoy.
guess
But
it's that author.
I
Every time I see that author, I'm like, "Oh, that's the one Ben likes."
yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, I picked that book up on the basis of enjoying this previous, and I mean, I it's what again were the reasons? It was like sexual references, swearing.
Yes. Challenged for profanity, sexual references, and use of a derogatory term.
Okay. I mean, it's been a while. I'm gonna guess that the derogatory term was towards Native American.
Probably so. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, how dare Sherman Alexie write about his experience?
Right, right.
Uh,
Yeah.
I do remember profanity, but like it's another one of those things where it's like these kids are all say, like seen saying that you're never gonna
Right.
prevent complete exposure. It's also the question of what you were saying earlier about, like, it's not the library necessarily the library's responsibility, and that as a, like, parent, I'm sure you feel plenty of responsibility to a degree.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Um, but yeah, most parents would rather, put up that wall versus like
Yeah.
engaging with.
I mean, that kind of stuff, I mean, just something as loose as profanity,
Mhm,
I mean, it's unavoidable,
right.
so, like, if the steps you're taking to avoid that is to, like, ban books, like, you're failing,
Mhm.
like, you're accomplishing nothing, but anyway. Number 5, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This one, when it came out, was on the bestseller list, the YA bestseller list for the New York Times for years.
Mm.
Made into a film. It has Angie Thomas has written several others now. Concrete Rose, which I believe is a prequel to this, and On the Come Up. I've read On the Come Up and really enjoyed it. Haven't read
Mm.
The Hate You Give. Banned and challenged for profanity, violence, and because it was thought to promote an anti-police message and
Oh,
indoctrination of
no.
social agenda. Yeah, that was the big one at the time. Like when it first came out, it was like
Mhm.
so negative towards police. That was the thing I was hearing constantly. Is this one you've read?
I have read it.
Okay.
It's been a few years. I did read it. I enjoyed it. Did see the movie as well, which I feel like the movie was generally pretty faithful.
Okay.
Yes, challenging authority is present in the book, but that's the whole issue through the book that the main character struggles with. It's, bringing these issues to light in a way that young people can relate to,
Yeah.
in a way that does directly impact their life.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, like, one of the main things that the main character struggles with is that her uncle, is a cop and
Mm.
is by her descriptions like she loves him, is a very, upstanding individual, but it's, taking once you get into, some of the more systemic issues, people are like, "Oh, no, like, can't yeah, we can't go that
No, no,
far."
no,
Like,
forget it. Have you read On the Come Up or any
no,
of her others?
I've not read any of her other books, so
Okay.
but I
Yeah, On the
would.
Come Up was a good time. Yeah. Yeah, I keep meaning to get to this one, and I just haven't. Number 4 on the list, Out of Darkness by Ashley Hope Perez, banned, challenged, and restricted for depictions of abuse and because it was considered to be sexually explicit. Number 3 on the list here, All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. Reasons banned and challenged for LGBTQIA plus content, profanity, and because it was considered to be sexually explicit. So this is another one that is an autobiography. It's a memoir. It's nonfiction. It would probably be cataloged as juvenile nonfiction, so like YA
Mhm,
nonfiction. It's very good. It's well written, and it really does a good job of taking you through his experience, which differs so much from mine.
mhm,
And in the course of his experience, figuring himself out, things that weren't talked about. Yeah, I mean, he experiences damaging and abusive, sexually abusive things, and those are presented in the book, and him dealing with that are presented in the book. But I feel like it was a really I don't know that I've ever seen it worked through in such a way, so concisely and so openly. I think it has a really fine line of him saying, "This is how I dealt with this. This is how I've come to terms with some of these abusive things I've experienced." And he also goes the other step of being like, "You don't have to do that. Like, you don't have to forgive anyone. You don't have to make amends or whatever. Like, this is my experience." And he lays out very clearly, like, I was abused. This was all bad stuff. And so it's not glorifying anything. And I felt like the way it was presented to somebody who's had experiences or even things that they can kind of relate to in that way, I think that would be so powerful to be seen and understood in that way. So I felt like I was glad to have read it, and I feel like it really is a valuable resource. So I would recommend it.
yeah, it sounds challenging, but good, very good.
It was. Yeah, it definitely was. Number 2, Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison, banned and challenged for LGBTQIA plus content, and because it was considered to be too sexually explicit. So always a theme in these
Mhm.
books, and that's another one. The number 1 most challenged book of 2021. I said that like it was a fun thing. I was like, the number 1 challenged book. So with the appropriate
Mhm.
somberness, the number 1 most challenged book of 2021, Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. This was banned, challenged, and restricted for LGBTQIA plus content and because it was considered to have sexually explicit images. So this is a graphic novel memoir, um, award-winning graphic novel memoir. And this in New York specifically has had a lot of challenges in response to it because of the way that it was promoted and then sort of like quietly like not promoted anymore. So there was a lot of conversation about this book around New York libraries and things. I have read this one. Have you?
I have, yes.
What did you think?
I mean, I enjoyed it as a memoir,
Yeah.
and it's, I think these issues are important, and it was a perspective that, yeah, I'm not as familiar with. So again, like we were talking about, raising awareness and trying to engage with empathy on these issues. And I would say probably the biggest strength of it is talking about these kind of issues very matter of factly. I don't know that I've ever read a graphic memoir before, and so I feel like
Yeah.
the pictorial depictions were more of the, like, textural flavor. I'm more of a fan
Mm.
of, like, finding unique and I don't wanna use the word
Like
flowery, but yeah,
phrasing
like,
something. Yeah.
just to find unique ways to exemplify an experience. So I feel like in this
Okay.
one, it was more towards the pictures, and then out of the actual text, I don't know if I got as much out of it as I
Okay.
should have, but I did
I'm
I
just
did
making
like
a
it.
note. Ben prefers purple prose. Okay, I've got that. I've got that written
That
down.
I mean,
Let me hit you
that's
with
not necessarily untrue.
Okay. All
I'm not
right.
gonna fight that.
Okay. Okay. Let me hit you with the publisher's synopsis
Okay.
here. In 2014, Maya Kobabe, who uses EMR pronouns, thought that a comic of reading statistics would be the last autobiographical comic he would ever write. At the time, it was the only thing he felt comfortable with strangers knowing about him. Now, Genderqueer is here. Maya's intensely cathartic autobiography charts their journey of self identity, which includes the mortification and confusion of adolescent crushes, grappling with how to come out to family and society, bonding with friends over erotic gay fan fiction, and facing the trauma of pap smears. Started as a way to explain to her family what it means to be non binary and asexual, Genderqueer is more than a personal story. It is useful and touching guide on gender identity, what it means, and how to think about it for advocates, friends, and humans everywhere. That's a pretty good synopsis of it. And one of the things I appreciated was some of the things that you touched on. It was a viewpoint and an experience that I just hadn't really thought about, didn't really know anything about. And, I think I'm a bigger graphic novel reader than you, always have been. Comic books and things have been a big part of my life always. And so I think that it was more I feel like I got it. I feel like I understood in a way that I might not have if it was just like prose fiction. And so I think because of that, I really appreciated it, and it really did kind of open my eyes to things that I hadn't really considered before. And so for that, I was really appreciative of it, and I feel like the challenges and everything going around, the things that are said about it, I don't know. I just feel like the point was to describe this person's experience and what they went through, and I just feel like it succeeds in that so well. I don't know. It continues to blow my mind why people don't get that. Like, number one, challenging books is just gross. Like, trying to ban books is gross and
Mhm,
dystopian. And like, even if that doesn't move you, even if like that doesn't change your mind about your approach, it never works. Like, all you do when you challenge these things is raise their profile and
mhm,
sell more copies. That's it. Like, that's what you accomplish. So, in some ways, I feel like the banned books list here is a good guide to find, new things that are out there that people are discussing, things that are like, stimulating a reaction in people. And that to me is like interesting and helpful and often informative.
mhm. Yeah, I would say one of the drawbacks to raising the profile of a book like this, at least for me when I was a kid, like I got away with reading so much stuff that my parents didn't know about just because they didn't know. But once they
Right.
knew about Harry Potter, it was like, no, it's off the table. So I think for
That's a good
specifically
point.
a book like this that, deals so directly with these very sensitive issues that are so personal that, so many young people could be dealing with, could be helped by, reading this book.
Yeah.
Just like having, taking it off library shelves where like they can, potentially go and get out of the home and read it away from their parents. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's a whole
Yeah.
other thing where
Yeah. It's such a weird mindset. It's such a weird approach. Like looking at this list when I saw Beyond Magenta, which was the number 10 here on the list, the first one that we talked about, it was such a like, oh, right, I remember that book when it came out a decade ago. Like I haven't thought about it since then, but it came up and I was like, right, that book. So I just don't know. Like sometimes it's just weird to me. Like people are combing shelves being like, oh, here's a problematic book. Let's raise his
Mhm.
profile. And again, I just feel like information and knowing these things that a lot of what these book covers really are LGBTQIA plus content, and that seems to be a consistent thread throughout here. I feel like what this does is stimulate conversations, hopefully in positive ways, and I feel like reading a book that is challenging should always be like the start of a conversation, not the final word, you know?
Absolutely.
So I just don't get it. Looking over like challenged books from the past, I know you said Harry Potter. Are there other books that come to mind as things that like you read maybe because they were challenged or brought to your attention in this way?
I know a contentious book in my house was the Witches by Roald Dahl. Um,
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah, but I mean, it's so like whimsical and what, like I don't know. The
Yeah.
whole I think that was more my parents' thing than the general like
Mhm.
consensus at the time among conservative religious parents.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
I always
I don't know. We were in China. I don't know what to tell you about.
right, right. It's so
um,
funny to think back about because like Harry Potter was one that was definitely like, oh, you shouldn't read that and everything. It's
mhm,
like an evil book. And even before that, I've talked about this before, but it cracks me up. I was allowed to watch I Dream of Jeannie, but was not allowed to watch Bewitched because she was a witch. And those shows are like the same show. I feel like, you know, only I Dream of Jeannie is like more sexual. You know what I mean? Like
mhm,
to me, like I Dream of Jeannie is more like weird male fantasy stuff.
mhm,
So it's funny the things that are and like Wizard of Oz, fine. Harry Potter, no.
mhm,
Like it's just what's the line that we're drawing? So I don't know. This
yeah,
year for like we've done we always do a banned books book club, and in recent years we read To Kill a Mockingbird was a few years back. Last year was I think it was Brave New World. We read Brave New World in 1984 within the last couple of years, and all of those were books that I hadn't read before.
mhm,
And I was reading them primarily because they were popping up like on banned books lists and things. Um, and I've all of those books that I've read because of that, I've just found really intriguing. This year, we're talking about The Handmaid's Tale, like that's the book
mhm,
club that we're doing. We're looking at kind of like with the Discord book clubs, we're kind of opening it up. You want to come talk about the show, you want to talk about the original novel, you want to talk about the graphic novel. That's what we're doing here this week. That was one that I had not read before. And you Handmaid's Tale?
no, I have not read.
Okay.
I'm a fan of Atwood, but I've only read a couple of her books.
Okay.
But yeah,
Well,
that's not on the list.
I picked up the graphic novel for this, and man, a difficult and upsetting read, particularly at the time that we're currently living in. And
Mhm.
that's what's so crazy about a lot of these challenged books, like 1984 or
I was gonna
Brave
say
New
the
World.
irony of trying to ban a book like 1984 is
I know.
insane.
I know. And especially like I don't remember which one it was, Brave New World or 84. I think it was 1984, but there was a whole push to like squash science, and there was like kind of a war on like science and truth,
Mhm,
and you were just supposed to like believe the party line and stuff, and I was like, how is this not written today? And I feel like the same is true of The Handmaid's Tale when you see, Supreme Court decisions and everything that are happening right now. And then you read something like The Handmaid's Tale. It's crazy to me that that was written decades ago and not as a response to the current moment in time. And it just seems like this stuff just kind of like keeps coming back. And I feel like that's why books like that are so important because it can show you things. It's the old cliche of
mhm,
like you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I feel
mhm,
like some of the things that come out in those type of books are really like, wow, everything old is new again. It's like
Mm,
the same kind of stuff is happening in a cycle, and I think that's the power of reading and reading some of these challenge books that you really kind of are shaken from perspectives that you held or things that you maybe thought were, you know, new or things that you thought, oh, that could never happen or whatever. And you see it expressed in different ways really can be eye opening in a way that I think is necessary for like our future.
mhm.
What a wild, dumb thing. This is my profound statement. I feel like the end of every one of these episodes. I just think this is so stupid. Like all the things that are out there that are challenging for us as like a society and the world, things that we have to like overcome, things that we have to work through together.
This is what we're choosing to focus our
Exactly.
energy on.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, come on, people. You know? Drives me nuts. Drives me nuts. Anything on the list here, Ben, that you're going to push to the top of your list that you are going to read now that we've talked about it as a banned book?
Um, Probably the one that sounded the most interesting to me was the Not All Boys Are Blue. Is
Yeah.
that is what it's
Yeah.
called? Yeah. That
Yeah.
I
That
love
was
that
good.
title so much.
I know, it is good.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely gonna look into that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, reading things on this list and looking at the things that are on the list just sort of like helped to remind me of the privilege I have as just like a straight white man.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's I don't know. I don't know. It sort of feels like I don't know, you just see those kind of differences and you see those kinds of things where it's like things that I never will have to think about, things that
Mhm.
will never be a challenge or a roadblock for me can just be the end for other people, and I hate that. I
Well, and
hate
I
that
mean,
that's what our society is.
yeah, I mean, that's the best reason for these books to exist is
Yeah.
for yeah, for straight white men like us.
Yes.
But I mean, yeah, just to offer the perspective that we don't have to we're not forced to engage with on a daily basis.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah, and anything that pops up as like something that's uncomfortable or something that like it's like you're supposed to just sweep it under the rug as someone else's problem or just like, well, don't be like that then if that's hard for you. And it's just like,
mhm.
ugh, it makes me mad and it makes me sad in equal parts. You know what? We should have planned something fun. We should have planned something fun to get us out of this. Ben, you got anything fun you can tell me about?
Um, well, before the call, we were talking about book to screen adaptations.
Yeah.
I saw Bullet Train yesterday, which I did
Oh,
not
okay.
realize was a book first until
Sure
the end of the
is. Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
I mean, my expectations were low, but I
Yeah.
really liked it.
Okay.
I think because of that.
Yeah.
The ending's a little messy, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
Very much style over substance, but
Okay.
Brad Pitt was great. And there's a lot of fun little cameos, and there's two assassins played by Aaron Tyler Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry. You
Okay.
might, yeah. And they're twins, but
Okay.
despite looking completely different, their
Sure. Of course.
rapport
Of
is
course.
excellent. They were by far my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah. Nice.
So
Okay.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. I had
Okay.
a good time.
All right, that counts. I'll take that as a positive thing. Looking ahead, I'm excited because my wife and I are going to see Rufus Wainwright in concert. So
Okay.
pretty excited about that. Do you know him? Do you know his stuff?
Uh, the cover of Hallelujah. That's about it.
That's true. He is famous for that cover of Hallelujah. No, we're going to see it in this place. We got cool seats. We've seen him once before. We saw him up in a place in Buffalo in an old church that was converted into a performance space. So he did an a cappella set that was just amazing. So I'm looking forward to seeing that again. So that's something that I'll put on my bright side, optimistic side. All right. Well, Ben, I hope you have a happy
Oh, thank you.
birthday. Do you have any fun birthday plans?
Yeah, well, so I sort of blocked out like a 4-day stretch.
Wow, look at you. Birthday week.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's fitting my style where it's like simultaneously low key, but I'm trying to,
Yeah.
do a few little things to make it special. Saturday I had like a little virtual hangout with some friends that are, in other
That's
countries.
cool.
And yeah, and then Sunday was like the family time, and then yeah, yesterday was a bullet train and getting good excellent Korean food, and
Nice.
so tonight I'm meeting my sister and her boyfriend, and I think my brother's coming also, and we're gonna go to a brewery and do trivia, and so that should be
Wild
fun.
times. We've got a brew fest coming up in
Yeah.
Wellsville over in Island Park. They're doing they're inviting a bunch of different breweries on October 1st. So we have like a
Okay.
family event in the morning, and then the brew fest takes over in the afternoon. For my 30th birthday, we went to see the Tom Cruise in the Jack Reacher movie, and nobody liked it. Uh, all right, how do you feel going
Well,
into your 30s, Ben? Are you feeling okay about it?
I feel still
Yeah,
processing. I mean, it's like any birthday but
yeah.
yeah, with the extra
Milestone,
pressure.
milestone.
Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, it is it's just a thing that I will have to deal with, but it's not.
So dark. That sounded so bleak. Oh my gosh. All right. Well,
Oh,
I appreciate you taking time out on your 30th birthday to talk with me about banned books,
yeah, no, absolutely.
even though book banning is stupid.
Yep, I always love being on the pod.
And thanks for all the music. All
Yeah.
the time, every time I play one of these themes, I'm like, how does he do it? How does he do it?
You guys gave me such a sweet shout out on the Star Trek episode. I meant to
I
message you about that. That was lovely. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, well, it's true. I mean, it's a fact. Anytime I'm like, hey, I need a jingle for this specific thing, you're like, do 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 do. You should be a jingle writer. That's what I think.
As you told me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll
Um,
write a review. I'll write a
all
review
right.
on
Yeah,
behalf
yeah,
of.
I will, actually, yeah, I will have you heavily featured on my Fiverr profile.
Perfect. I
Yeah.
would be happy to do that. All
Actually,
right,
could you come
gang.
in and go into some local Waynesboro businesses and just
Yeah,
advertise? Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I'll just show up and be like, I couldn't help but overhear. I know the perfect jingle man. Let me give him a jingle. Ha ha. Yeah, I'd love to be your jingle hype man. Absolutely, I will do that. No
Well,
problem.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome. Well, this has been a depressing but fun episode, Ben. Always good to see you. Remember, everybody, you can rate, review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We have just recently updated all of the episodes of the All the Book Show and House Things to the YouTube channel, so you can find all the old episodes. Lots of those feature Ben over the years talking about different things.
And don't
Next
you wanna
week,
hear more of this sweet, sweet voice?
of course, yeah, but that was 20-year-old Ben, so there was a lot
Okay.
more life in his, there's a pep in his step.
Are
So
we pretending that we pretending that my voice wasn't always like this, you know?
that's true. That's the
Yeah,
hallmark. Yeah, it's a hallmark
yeah,
of
yeah,
of all the magic that you bring.
yeah.
Next week on the episode, Kate and I are going to be interviewing Winsome Bingham. Winsome is the author of the picture book Soul Food Sunday. We had talked about this in an early episode earlier in 2022, and I got a cold call from Winsome Bingham saying like, "Hey, I heard your episode. Thanks for talking about the book." And I was like, "Yeah." While we're talking on the
Ma
phone, will you come and do an interview? And she was like, "Sure." So you can hear Kate and I talk all about her book that's out and all those things she has coming up next time right here on House Things. Ben, until we meet again, happy birthday, my friend.
Thank you very much.
So long, everybody.